Hello, I'm going to take a look at the game between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura that took place in 2023. A year ago, it was a game played online at AI Cup on chess.com website. Knight f3, knight f6, c4. It's usual for Carlsen to play English opening. This opening is very solid. This is very solid choice for white to make. I'm not saying that d4 or e4 is any worse, but just English opening is known for being solid. d6, knight c3, g6. Well, it might turn into King's Indian if white plays now e4 and d4. And white might choose a variation. For example, white might play now d4, and on the move later, after bishop g7, white might choose if white wants to play e4 or white wants to play g3, which is a slightly different variation, which resembles Catalan opening, and it definitely has some potential because this bishop, which is not going to be blocked by e4 pawn, might pose some serious questions to black's position. Magnus plays e4, bishop g7, so this is going to be with we might be pretty sure that this is going to be a King's Indian unless Magnus just decides out of the blue to play d3 now and not to go for d4, which is possible, but it's just in general it's just less natural and less strong to play d3 than d4 in this position, because just d4 is gains more center and gains more control. Naturally, d4 was played in the game, and now I expect Nakamura to play castle. Castle is one move. There are other moves like bishop g4, for example. Bishop g4, h3 might be bishop f3, queen f3, somehow weakening the d4 pawn, but it's castle, short castle is very common. Bishop g3 might have some ideas in it. For example, bishop g3, h3, bishop f3, queen f3, might be c5 now. Not really sure. c5, e5. Let's think about this for a moment. D takes e, queen takes b7, knight b2, d7, or might be we just can capture on d4. If queen e8, I think that black is going to have a pretty decent compensation after taking on c3. So probably white should not be taking on a8. White should be playing something like knight b5, threatening to play both queen a8 and the knight c7. Just a variation, but an interesting one. And it seems to me that black is already on the verge of losing a rook. So castle, black has to attack. Queen a8, maybe d3. Yep, d3. It's dangerous, but it should not be sufficient for black to play this way. Bishop d2. Okay, there is some attack, but it shouldn't be enough. Castle was played in the game. We just analyzed the variation with the bishop g4 played, bishop g4, h3. But in fact, Nakamura castled. Castle, bishop e2, extremely standard. And now, if you and now there are two moves in this position. One move is very common, e5, and another move significantly less common is c5. C5, I don't remember the exact line, but I'm pretty sure that this moves was played many times. Maybe d takes c, and now not a capture on c5. What should I do now? Maybe knight a6, capture on d6, and now maybe capture on d6, castle, rook e8, bishop d3, knight c5, rook e1. So this is a gambit-like game that is might follow c5, since after c5, if black captures, I think it isn't great for black. Queen d8, rook d8, e5, knight g4, and knight d5, and it might be a serious threat of playing knight c7 and capturing on a8. So black has to play some, knight c6 probably, but it might be okay. Maybe that it's totally all right for black. But I remember that there is usually, I think after c5, if white captures on c5, that black doesn't capture on c5 back. But I'm not sure why, or if this is 100% sure at all. Okay, so let's take a look how the game continued. Bishop e2, and Nakamura makes a pretty rare move, like a move that is not as common as e5. He plays knight a6. Apparently, this move is going to prepare c5. This is the purpose of this move, and it's now let's think how white should react to this move. For example, if white castles now, then c5 might follow, and if d takes c5, then knight c5, and it seems like black has a good position. So if pawn is attacked, bishop d3, knight d3, queen d3, bishop e6, with a pair of bishops, black should be having a good position. And might be that there is something better than castle, but okay, let's move on. And white in fact castled to the short side. After the castle, followed e5. Nakamura answered with e5. He didn't play c5. It was a possible move, and it's interesting how white should react in this situation, since we saw that capturing on c5, knight c5, it seems good for black. Maybe e5, d takes e5. Oh, yeah, I can't take on d4 since it's going to be a capture on f6 and capture on f6 again, knight d4, and there is no sufficient compensation for the pawn. So e5, no, c5, e5, d take e5, now d take e5, now knight g4, seems good, bishop f4, I don't know, it seems like white managed to consolidate his position. Might be not so good for black. Bishop f5, h3, the knight has to go to some, we capture the knight. So after h3, it seems that the capture on d1 is a must, because otherwise they're going to be queen c1 capturing the knight. Rook d1, knight h6, g4, bishop e6. Seems pretty good for white to me. Okay, so we took a look at the variant that might have risen after c5, but instead, so c5, e5, and we see that e5 might be an option. Here, and maybe this is the reason why c5 was not played in the game, because e5 might be good. Nakamura in the game Nakamura played e5, and this move is standard in King's Indian. This move is standard. So if you see this position for the first time, or for the second time, or for the third time, but you don't see it like often, and you don't play King's Indian often, so you might question yourself, what is the reason? Because after playing e5 black, there is an option to capture the pawn twice. This pawn is hanging, and white might go for the capture. D take e, knight e5. And there is a standard move of capturing on e4, knight e4. If white plays knight e4, then bishop e5, and white has a good position. For example, bishop g5, queen d1, rook d1, bishop d7. Might be not be as good. Bishop e7, rook, knight. Somehow don't like this position that much for like. Okay, so if capture on e5, knight e4, bishop e5, bishop g5. Maybe f6. No, f6 is f6, capture on d8, rook d8, and capture on f6. But if capture on d1, rook d1, f6, f4, capture on g5. Oh no, there is a capture on b2 in this position, and the bishop is stuck. And if bishop goes away, then there is this move. So okay, it should be okay. So and capture on e4, and if black does something like queen d8, rook d8, knight f7, then seems to me that there is knight c3, knight d8, knight e2 check, king h1, and it seems like black has way too many pieces of the knight c1. It's good to eliminate this knight, because this bishop, because this bishop c1 would become pretty powerful. And let's just count the pieces. Black has 2 bishops against the rook and the pawn, and it should be a pretty good position for black. Pretty good, at least. Might be even better. It might be even winning. Just right that, because 2 bishops against the rook and the pawn, it's just I think it should be good, at least. At least it should be good. So this is why the capture on e5, the capture on e5 is not usually working. Like double capture on e5, white is usually not, unless unless white knows what she does. White usually doesn't capture on e5, because a capture on e4 usually gives black pretty good game. And after e5, let's so this capture doesn't work. So what then? There is move bishop e3. There is move d5. There is move bishop g5 to think over. d5. If white plays d5 now, then there is knight c5, queen c2, and Some tactics should be calculated with a capture on e4, maybe. Like, for example, no, I think that there is no capture on e4. I just was thinking. Queen c2 and now just a5, a5. This position, kind of. Okay. Bishop e3. Don't know. By the way, maybe in this position there is a capture on e4, but probably again there is no. So knight e4, knight e4, knight e4, queen e4, bishop f5, queen h4, bishop f6, and the queen is not going to be captured. So this is the position. Okay. This is the position that might rise after d5. After bishop e3, knight g4. Very standard move. Bishop g5, f6, bishop h4. Some people capture on d4. I don't know what is the reason for this capture. It seems like to play g5, bishop g3, h5. It's kind of more interesting. h3, then h4. H takes g4, h takes g3, f takes g3, bishop takes g4, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 against 7. The position isn't clear, but it might be good for black. So bishop e3 might be considered in this position. A capture on e5, I don't think it's a good idea to capture on e5, since it's going to create a square on c5 for the knight. d5 might be good, but it depends what exactly white might achieve. Bishop e3 seems also, it's difficult to decide which move is the best in this position. Might be bishop e3 is solid. Okay, let's see what happened in the later. e5. Magnus plays bishop e3. Now move knight g4 is expected, and it's probably pretty good move. Another option for black, as I see, is to capture on d4 and then create pressure on e4 pawn, since there is certain logic in it. After capturing on d4, knight a6 is going to c5, and there is going to be move rook e8. So capture on d4 also seems tempting to me. Okay, Nakamura plays knight g4. Now bishop g5, queen c8, queen e8, capture on e5 instead. Okay, so Nakamura plays just different. He doesn't play f6. Capture on e5. If capture with a knight, knight d5. It's not an attack on c6, on c7. c7 is defended. Might be knight f3, bishop f3, rook b, queen b2, bishop b2, rook b1, bishop g7, bishop e7. Okay, so it's complicated stuff, but black shouldn't be very bad. D e5, captured with the so knight e5 seems like a normal move. Queen c1, h6, bishop d2, king h7, king h7, c5. Carlsen sacrifices the pawn c in order to open the lines. It seems like pretty tempting and pretty ambitious move, and a solid line. If now black captures on c5, then there is knight d5, and if black doesn't capture on c5, then there is bishop a6 capture. So c6 might be good. c6 is actually played. Bishop a6, b takes a6, h3, knight f6, rook d1, queen e7, bishop e3, knight e8, queen c2, f5, take capture on f5, capture with the pawn. Okay, let's pause for a second and think what is the best move for white. It seems that Carlsen actually managed to create a good diagonal b1 h7, and there is a king on h7. There is also a queen on c2, and it means that might be some chances. But what white is lacking a white squared bishop. White squared bishop is lacking, and there is no rook d6 since there is going to be knight captures on d6. Also, there is no move knight h4 since the h4 is controlled by the queen. Black now would play probably e4, but I'm not sure. Because after if black plays e4, then white plays knight d4. Maybe move rook e1 now is going to create with a threat of bishop d4, e4, bishop g7, knight, or not even bishop d7. For example, rook e1, e4, rook e1, and we make 0 move. Bishop d4, e4, knight captures on e4. This is the idea. F takes captures on e4, rook captures on e4. And there are a lot of threats, and bishop f5 is going to fall. It might be not that good. Bishop f5, rook e7, bishop c2, bishop takes g7, knight takes g7, and it might be that there is no sufficient compensation for white in this variation. But still, rook e1 might have rook e1, for example, e4, and something. Otherwise, it's difficult. What white can do? White can play b4. White, it's difficult to find other useful moves. Move like g4 is too weakening. Okay, so it seems like rook e1. Rook e1 is played in the game. Rook e1 is played in the game. Queen f7. Rook a to d1. Now white managed to improve the position of his pieces. Rook g8, knight e2. Interesting maneuver, and from Carlsen, knight is going to g3, where it's probably going to g3, where it's going to put some extra pressure on f5. That's what I think. Bishop e6, knight g3, king h8, knight h4. The pressure is serious. If now black plays g6, knight g6, king h7, knight f8, double check, king h8, queen h7, checkmate. It's a beautiful variation. Check, knight f6, king h8, queen h7, checkmate. So rook f8 was played. Nakamura plays bishop d2, f4, knight g6, king g8, knight h5, bishop h8. Well, it already seems that so white already can win an exchange immediately, or white can choose to capture. No, but okay, there is no knight e5 since queen h5 is going to follow, but there is knight f8, and there is at least an exchange, and the black skin is open, so it's a winning position for white. Knight f8, king f8, g4. Knight is h5 is a little bit stuck, but g4 is a sufficient defense. Capture, bishop h6, king g8, knight g3, bishop a2, queen e4, bishop d5, queen g4, king h6, queen h4, king g8, knight e4, queen f5, rook d3, knight g7. Okay, let's Magnussen is having one position against Nakamura, and let's think for a second how to finish this game. It seems like a move like rook g3 is tempting to improve the position of the rook and just to put some more pressure. Rook g3, bishop e4, rook e4, rook f8, and rook g2 might be then. And if rook g3, rook f8, then maybe rook g5, queen f3, rook g3, rook f8. Another move that is tempting is to play knight f6, king f7, and then knight captures on d5. And if capture on d5, then rook d5. But if black captures queen d3, then there are some checks with queen f6, king g8, knight e7, king h7, and there is no win in sight. Okay, knight f6, king f7. Rook d5. No, knight d5, queen d3. Queen e7, knight, king g6. Queen d6, and maybe queen d6, and if king h7, then knight f6 and queen d3, or king f5, knight e7 and queen d3, and if king f7, then queen d3, queen d7, d7. Oh, I don't think I see a clear win. And knight f6, if I play knight f6, I'm going to lose kind of knight f6, king f7, knight d5, queen d3, then. Well, the attack is very dangerous. White has a very dangerous attack, but I don't see a clear continuation. But might be I would go for knight f6 still, which was played in the game. King f7, And now, okay, so what to do? What to do now? There is knight d5, queen d3 with no clear checkmate inside, but a very dangerous attack. It's pretty good. It's a good chance. It's a good move. Oh, there is rook d5, c takes d5, knight d5. So, well, I would knight d5, queen d3. Knight d5, queen d3, queen e7, king g6, queen d6, king f7, queen d7, king has to go to g6, then there is a capture on c6, queen c6, and there is a capture on at least on a8. So knight d5, queen d3, queen e7, king g6, queen d6, king f7, queen d7, king g6, queen c6, king h7, queen a1, a8, king h6, and again there is an exchange. So knight d5, knight d5 is played, queen e d3, queen e7, king g6, queen d6, queen f7, queen d7, and at this position Nakamura resigned. Thank you for watching the game.